Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Environmental Quality EQB. I am Nancy Daubenberger, Commissioner of MnDOT and the Chair of EQB. And it's nice to be joining board members in person and those who were able to also join us online. And one little flag before we begin, I just want to mention the December meeting date has changed from December 21st to December 14th. That's from 1 to 4 again. So moving up a week, we'll be here before we know it, right? But anyway, so with that, our interim executive director, Eric Dahl, will now take roll call.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to go down the list here. Commissioner Grace Arnold. Is she online? Come back to her too. Public member Peter Bakken. Public member Joseph Bauerkemper. Chair Commissioner Daubenberger.
Here.
Public member Julie Gehring.
Here.
Commissioner Steve Grove.
Kevin McKinnon here for Steve Grove.
Welcome, Kevin. Public member Riley Hintz. Okay. Commissioner Katrina Kessler. Public member Mehmet Koner Steenberg.
Yes, here. Thank you.
Proxy Assistant Commissioner Dan Huff.
Good afternoon. I am here.
Thank you for joining. Public member Paul Nelson. Public member Nick Martin.
Here. Thanks, Eric.
Commissioner Tom Peterson. Commissioner Alice Roberts Davis. Commissioner Sarah Stroman. Commissioner Gerald Van Amberg.
Here.
And then Met Council Sue Vento.
Here.
Right. Thank you. We have a quorum. Back to you, Madam Chair.
You, Executive Director Dahl, appreciate that. And, before we go much further, I want to take a moment to thank and honor one of our board members who will be terming off EQB and present her with the plaque. So Julie Gehring, even though you're not here in person, I'm just going to hold this up. Hopefully that can be viewed, but we have a plaque for you for your service. And so her term ended actually in 2002, but she helped us out going above and beyond to continue to serve on EQB for almost all of 22, because here we are in November. And board member from Congressional District 7, Julie Gehring, has served on the EQB since Governor Tim Pawlenty appointed her on March 26th of 2007. So that's a long term of service, and serving the state of Minnesota and EQB for 15 years and 7+ months. Thank you for that service, board member Gehring. And maybe I'll just pause here to see if any other board members want to say anything. Congratulations or thanks to Julie, or any reflections on her work.
Well, this is Commissioner Peterson, and I'd just like to thank Julie for all her service. And, I always think about that 7th district seat as just like some of the others, where Julie from the Moorhead, Detroit Lakes area up there, and those long commutes before we had virtual options and everything. And so not just great service on the board and having that expertise that she has with all the different water groups and everything out there, but always recognizing the sacrifice and the time, that the people from outstate make to do that for a long time. So thank you, Julie. Well done.
It's Jerry Van Amberg. I'm close by to Julie, so I get to see her every once in a while. But I would like to thank Julie for representing our district so well. Julie does much of the work up here and in the water area as well through her work. So she's done a lot over the years, continues to do a lot, and appreciate very much what you have done, Julie. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Commissioner Stroman.
Thank you. Julie Hyatt's Sarah Stroman from DNR. And it's a bummer not to see you in person here today. I always enjoy that since, as Commissioner Peterson noted, it's such a distance normally for you to travel, and you were really diligent about that. But it's great to see you on the video. And I just want to say, too, thank you for your incredible service to EQB. You've been a wonderful member, but you've been a wonderful partner to so many of the agencies here and obviously to all of us who work in the water world. And so wish you well and hope to see you again. While this might be goodbye and serving together on EQB, I hope it is not goodbye and doing good things together still. So talk to you soon, I hope.
Thank you, Commissioner Stroman. Appreciate those words. But we'll have an opportunity to say more at the end too, if anyone wants to think about it a little bit or later. But now we will go ahead and move on in our agenda. So the next item is approval of the consent agenda. And oh, I'm sorry, wanted to provide a reminder, and I think this was for me in particular, but others too, using the microphones to speak directly into the microphone. Yeah, I think I had it a little far away and I got a little flag on that. So we will try to remember right into the microphone. But could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move the consent agenda of the minutes and the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Kessler. Thank you. Any discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Hearing no opposition, the motion carries and the consent agenda is adopted. So at this point, I will turn it over to Director Cedarleaf Dahl for the Executive Director report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have just a couple of announcements and then we'll get right to today's agenda. Just a reminder for the CD7 appointment. This is a pending appointment. We'll likely hear about this in the next couple weeks. And again, thank you, Julie, for your service. I really appreciate all the work you've done at EQB, and being a staff member to you was really an honor, and thank you again. Also, CD3 is now open for applications, and there's a map of the district. You can apply on the Secretary of State website. That's all available on the EQB website. And if any board members or anyone joining today would like to join, you can go to the website and we would welcome that. The earliest that appointment will take place is January 1st. I also have a MEPA Celebration in Congress update today. Later, you'll hear from Faith Krogstad about the Environmental Congress for 2023. I just wanted to mention that last time you heard from her about the MEPA 50th celebration, and we're basically looking at kind of decoupling those and doing a MEPA board event in May or June of this coming year, and we'll celebrate MEPA then, but we'll also probably celebrate it at the Congress. And I just wanted to kind of make sure you understood that we'll be doing it in both areas. Faith will provide an update kind of later on the meeting on the direction of the Congress. And then EQB had a new staff member join us today, and she is sitting in the back of the room. Maybe she can raise her hand. That is Hazel Houle, and she recently returned to her home state of Minnesota after working for the state of California, the Center for Judicial Education and Research. She's an animal lover, and we're excited to have her. She'll be helping run the next board meeting, and really happy to have her join the team. So thank you and welcome, Hazel. All right, so now to the logistics of how to make a public comment online. We've all maybe done this before, but if you are new to joining us, This is a hybrid meeting, so there is some people in person and some people online. And if you would like to make a comment online, you'd raise your hand in WebEx or type your name in the WebEx chat. And the next slide will show how you raise your hand. There's a little hand there. Click that, or you can click the 3 dots on your phone and raise your hand if you're joining from a mobile. If you are in the room and would like to make a comment, there's comment forms over at the sign-in table, and help get those up here. If you have any questions, there is a tech helpline available on the EQB website. You're having trouble raising your hand or are not hearing us or seeing us. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Dahl. We're going through all of that. So then that brings us to our next agenda item, the 2022 Minnesota State Seed Pollinator Report. And this is a decision item, and we'll have discussion on the Pollinator Action Framework. And so we will welcome Rebecca Gutierrez Moreno. And she is our EQB State Pollinator Coordinator. Thank you for presenting today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I am very excited to be seeing you all in person. This is crazy that this is the first time I present to you in person. It's been virtual since now, so I'm nervous and excited to see you all. Yeah, so my name is Rebecca Gutierrez Moreno, and I am the State Pollinator Coordinator with the EQB. And I am here representing the Interagency Pollinator Protection Team, or IPPT for short. I'm going to be saying IPPT a lot today. So you know it stands for the Pollinator Protection Team. And I will be presenting the 2022 Minnesota State Agency Pollinator Report and the draft of the Pollinator Action Framework that the team has been working on. Many members of the IPPT are joining us virtually, and there's a few of them here in person. I was going to say to raise your hands, but basically it's the 3 people behind me. So thank you for being here. I feel your support. And we're going to go the next. Okay, so today, first, I am going to give you a background on the pollinator issue and pollinator subject and the rationale of why we want to move forward with an action framework and information about how the report came about. Then third, I will be talking about the action framework and the state agency pollinator report. I will explain how I structured the presentation for us to understand these are 2 different documents. The Minnesota State Agency Pollinator Report is a final draft, and the Minnesota Pollinator Action Framework is our first draft. And finally, I'm going to be explaining the next steps that the IPPT would like to take to finalize the action framework next year. And I would like to hear, if you have feedback on that as well. So actions for today, we have the draft Minnesota Pollinator Action Framework. If you see a parentheses with a number, that's where the document is in the packet. So if you want to see any details, you can refer to that. So for this item, will be discussion and provide feedback. And then we're going to talk about the 2022 Minnesota State Agency Pollinator Annual Report. This is for final discussion. And at the end, we want to propose to approve a resolution for the report. So first, why are we concerned about pollinators? And I think a lot of our board members have heard this discussion many times. I just, for those of us, people joining us on virtually that might not have heard this, pollinators are in trouble. And we care about pollinators because we need them for food resources, for natural resources, and, to keep our economic strength as well. And in the world, there are about 200,000 pollinator species, and most of them are insects. And just to give you, a kind of like size of the scale of what we're talking about here is that if we consider bees alone, in the United States, we have approximately 4,000 species of wild bees. And in Minnesota, as of recent records, we have about 490 species of wild bees. This diversity is really wonderful. However, it also brings complexities to the work that we do to address their different needs. And as I mentioned, pollinators are threatened, and the main factors threatening them are the loss of habitat, pesticides, parasites and diseases, climate change. And these stressors do not act alone. They can interact with each other, and then they amplify each other's detrimental effect on pollinators. Minnesota has continued its commitment to protecting pollinators. The first executive order established the Governor's Committee for Pollinator Protection and directed the EQB to convene the interagency pollinator protection team with state agency leadership. The second executive order provided continuity to the work of its predecessor and directed the EQV also to develop a civic engagement process to ensure public participation in pollinator policy and program development, and to build cross-sector partnerships. The IPPT to date has worked with external subject matter experts to identify pollinator protection goals, key outputs, and scorecards to measure progress toward our goals. Additionally, we have identified challenges and made recommendations to address them. Since 2016, the state has laid the foundation for a coordinated approach for interagency efforts and for working with the public to help Minnesota's pollinators. IPPT member agencies continue to work together and individually to protect pollinators through programs, initiatives, and policies. And here's just a list of what member agencies are part of the IPPT. So about the draft pollinator action framework, you can find it on page 27. We want to build with this strong foundation as the basis. The IPPT considered that the necessary next step to help pollinators is to develop this framework that can be used as a guide by state agencies, the state legislature, and the public to strategically align resources, policies, and programs for pollinator protection. This year, the team focused most of their efforts in engaging with the public to gather ideas for action and working with subject matter experts to develop the first draft of the framework. This draft includes actions state agencies can lead directly by taking administrative action. Also, it includes actions the Minnesota legislature can enact by writing laws and allocating funds, and actions the state can encourage individuals, organizations, communities to do. Now, about the 2022 Minnesota State Agency Pollinator Report. So in this report, we give an overview of the draft action framework, but we also include highlights of state-led pollinator protection efforts that state agencies have been doing in the past year. Also, we identify some of the main challenges to achieve our pollinator protection goals and provide context for opportunities for action. And we address the subject of equity in the work that we do to help pollinators. So this year, we are highlighting important interagency collaborations. For example, the work that the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Education are doing to incorporate pollinator education in summer school programs. State agencies also continue to collaborate with external partners to move progress forward toward our pollinator protection goals. For instance, the Department of Agriculture continues its collaboration with the University of Minnesota Extension Service to promote integrated pest management and protecting pollinators from pesticides in different events. IPPT member agencies report progress in the implementation of key programs that promote pollinator habitat and pollinator health. So for example, Bowser-led programs like the Lawns to Legumes programs, the new Habitat Enhancement Landscape Program, and Habitat-Friendly Solar Program continue to make progress. Also, the Department of Transportation achieved planting 61% of acres of disturbed soil that requires revegetation out of their goal of 75% by 2025. And continued efforts by the Minnesota Zoo with their Dakota Skipper Conservation Program are, still yielding great results. So we also want to highlight that the DNR's biological survey, in collaboration with the University of Minnesota's Bee Lab, wrapped up the final year of the Wild Bee Survey. And as I mentioned before, recorded up to 490 species of wild bees in the state. And a highlight within this highlight is that for the first time since 1934, they recorded the presence of a species of wild bee, and I am sure I'm going to mispronounce the name. It's called Duphorea novaangliae, something like that. Forgive that pronunciation, but it hasn't been recorded since 1934, and this last year they found it in the survey efforts. So just a little bit of a background of how we organize this work. We are basing our structure in the Executive Order 1928. These are the main sections of the report that are composed by our 3 pollinator protection goals and our desired outcome of restoring healthy, diverse pollinator populations. This year, we include a reference to what the Pollinator Action Framework will be addressing for each of these sections. So in this presentation, for each of these sections, I will have 2 slides. The first one, we will be talking about the pollinator report. And in the second one, I will mention how we are addressing that goal in the action framework. So our first goal is that lands throughout Minnesota support healthy, diverse pollinator populations, and our key output is more food resources, nesting, and overwintering sites for pollinators. In the report, we identify the main challenge we face, that is the loss and fragmentation of habitat that reduces the availability of quality habitat for pollinators, and we also describe the context for the work that we carry out. Sorry about that. And the Pollinator Action Framework draft includes actions to protect, restore, and enhance pollinator habitat in both public and private lands. For example, to promote opportunities to partner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency closed landfill program to install pollinator habitat on closed landfill sites. That's an example of action. Additionally, it includes actions to design and implement strategic policy and programs to improve the quality of habitat restorations, connect habitat in highly fragmented landscapes, and develop guidance about integrated habitat management approaches. For instance, we're considering an action to collaborate with and support seed and plant native vendors and other partners to increase the production of plant species important for pollinators, including trees and shrubs. Our goal 2 is that Minnesotans use pesticides judiciously and only when necessary. And this second goal, the key output is reduced pesticide impacts to pollinators through integrated pest management. Integrated pest management is the approach that sorry, I feel like my keys are very sorry about that. I'm gonna try to hold it. Is this still, okay. It was trying to annoy me, so I was thinking it was annoying you too. So integrated pest management is the, oh, maybe that one worked better. Maybe I'm the issue. Okay, this sounds better. Yay. Okay, so as I was saying, integrated pest management, or IPM, that's the acronym that we use, is the approach that prioritizes the judicious use of pesticides because it seeks to prevent the buildup of pest populations, identify pest species to use species-specific management strategies, monitor pests to know when action thresholds have been reached, and use a combination of management techniques to address the pest problem by the most effective and economical means, and with the least possible hazard to people, property, and the environment. So The challenge this goal is addressing is that pesticide exposure can negatively impact pollinators and their habitat. The report includes context to understand the complexity of this subject because many factors influence pesticide use, including things like pest pressures, weather, cost, safety, personal values, or aesthetics. To help us understand pesticide risk to pollinators, we included this Venn diagram in the report where we can see that the risk a pesticide poses to pollinators is the result of two factors. The toxicity of the pesticide, which is the potential to damage or kill, and exposure, time and frequency of contact with the pesticide. The Environmental Protection Agency considers both factors to determine how pesticides can be used. The Pollinator Action Framework draft for this goal includes actions to develop, promote, and encourage the adoption of IPM in agricultural and non-agricultural lands and in managed pollinator colonies. For instance, to develop IPM programs for crops and non-agricultural systems where they do not exist. Additionally, it includes actions to protect pollinators from pesticide exposure, such as promoting mitigation strategies to reduce pollinators' exposure to pesticides, supporting and conducting research focused on pesticide risk to pollinators, and increasing awareness about pesticide misuse reporting. Our goal 3 is that Minnesotans understand, value, and support pollinators. And in the report, we are including, our key output that is more action through community commitments, and we explain the context in which we're working. Because over the years, we have seen that Minnesotans continue to care and value pollinators. There are many organizations and individuals in the state that advocate for pollinators in the legislature, organize pollinator celebration events, and promote pollinator-friendly practices in their communities. However, there is still a long way to go to increase public participation in pollinator conservation efforts. We think agencies need to evaluate current pollinator-related programs for opportunities to increase equitable access to information and resources. The Pollinator Action Framework draft, we think it's an opportunity for agencies to evaluate the 2020 civic engagement process and to consider that equity must be a central piece when creating new programs that connect pollinators with broader environmental issues and social issues too. The actions included in this draft reflect the lessons we have learned while working with pollinators and encouraging Minnesotans to take action. The framework draft includes actions to build strong relationships and partnerships to increase awareness and educational resources about different ways to help pollinators, to collaborate with communities that have adopted pollinator resolutions, to find new ways to encourage communities that haven't done so. Some examples of actions that we're considering for this section in the framework are to create a process with tribal nations to work together for pollinator protection, collaborate with the Minnesota Science Teachers Association to promote pollinator educational resources to use in K-12 classrooms, and increase the availability of technical expertise to assist landowners, land managers, land stewards in creating and managing pollinator habitat. Our final section, final section, our desired outcome. In this last area of work, we're focusing mainly on making sure that we have the right knowledge, tools, and strategies to guide this work and achieve the desired outcome that we have of healthy pollinator populations. And this means making sure that we have the best information guiding our actions so that we can be informed decision makers, making sure the protections in place for pollinators are focused on the right things for the species that need them the most, and that those protections work as intended. Making sure we are coordinating efficiently with our partners and not duplicating efforts, and making sure that we're planning for long-term solutions that build on and evolve from previous work. In this section, the Pollinator Action Framework draft includes actions like planning, producing, and sharing the information that state agencies and external partners need to make important decisions and develop strategic protections for imperiled pollinators. Some examples of actions that we're considering for this section are research risk of environmental pollutants like salt and heavy metals on pollinators, develop a model local ordinance for hobby beekeeping that addresses managed pollinators' concerns, and create and maintain an inventory of ongoing pollinator protection programs and initiatives in the state. So our next steps to finalizing the framework is, well, first we're going to publish on December 1st, when approved, the Minnesota Pollinator Protection Team, the Minnesota State Agency Pollinator Report and the draft action framework with all the actions that have been approved. Then in 2023, we want to do a second round of public engagement. We think there's still a lot of room there to work with the public to finalize this draft. Once we hear from the public during the spring, we want to work with agency leadership to bring what we heard from the public and let them guide us for the final draft. And then during the summer to polish that framework and bring it to approval by the end of the summer of 2023. And one thing that the IPPT wants to do, because we're going to be heavily working on this document, is that by the end of summer, that action framework with language accompanying that report is going to become the 2023 pollinator report. So today the staff wants to recommend the board to approve, to consider this resolution to approve the 2022 Minnesota State Agency report and continue to support cross-agency leadership and collaboration to finalize this document, and to continue to work with the public and to convene future meetings to monitor progress and invite public input. But I don't want to end without acknowledging, the people that have helped us during this process. The University of Minnesota Extension Service and B-Lab, Natural Resources and Conservation Service of the United States, Department of Agriculture, the Monarch Joint Venture, and Cersei Society were some of the organizations that reviewed the draft and gave us direct feedback on it. But we also want to thank all the members of the public that participated in our public engagement efforts through our public engagement platform, sharing their ideas for action to protect pollinators. It was really encouraging to see all the different ideas that came from the public and even discussions that were had in that platform. It was fun to see, and I just want to make sure that the public knows that we as the interagency pollinator protection team read them all and considered them, and a lot of them informed some of the actions that are going to be, included in the draft that is made public in December. So I want to thank you for your attention, and sorry about that weird noises that I was making with my mouth. And this is my contact information. If you have comments, questions, ideas, also to please, here I am. Yeah, and I think I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair. Have any questions for discussion?
Well, thank you, Rebecca. And I think the sounds of your P's reverberating back at you were worse for you than they were for us. But it did sound better, I think, when you took the different microphone. But now I'm on the one you are. So first of all, I want to thank you and your team, the other agencies who worked on this report. But also, I want to join you in acknowledging the work of the other organizations and the public who provided input. It was a great all-around effort. But before we go to the resolution, I want to find out, do any board members have any questions for Rebecca or comments?
Hi, it's Commissioner Arnold. I just want to give a shout out to the team and let everyone know that my son came home with a pollinator packet of seeds, a couple of them from his first grade teacher. So I immediately sent a picture to Eric, but it's like the work is real, and it was a great conversation that I got to have with him about what pollinators are and how we can support them. So I kudos to the team. It was it wasn't what I was expecting, and it came home with a little EQB note on it, and it was really great. So so thanks everyone.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
I got the mic working this time, so I'll see if I can keep it this way. A quick question for you. I noticed the resolution is about the release of the report. Do you want to limit questions about the resolution or also the framework at this time?
I think we can take questions or comments on either the report or the upcoming work on the framework as well.
Okay, with respect to the report, well-written, engaging, I liked it a lot. And I also want to say thank you to particularly the DOT for your efforts with the pollinator habitat on and so forth. Very, very nice. With respect to the framework, I actually have quite a few, and maybe it might be better to go offline with them, but they have to do with my experience in terms of promoting conservation with private landowners. So my comments are on sort of the private landowner side, and you have components in there for building relationships and awareness, and those can organically grow people to go toward action. But we've found when we were doing our conservation programs that if we had a very intentional effort toward the social side of why landowners adopt or don't adopt different things, we actually really created some momentum. And we actually had the data to show that prior to starting to do the human dimensions of this, we were maybe getting a couple dozen conservation practices with landowners a year in the county that I worked at. As we did that, within a few years, we were well up over 100 a year. And some of those types of things are, how do you move people from being aware to having an intention to act? And there are triggers that you can identify. And then how do you move people from an intention to act to actually acting? Each one, there are barriers to acting, and you can actually formulate an intentional strategy that really accelerates that. And that's where kind of I have some thoughts for you.
Thank you, Board Member Nelson. I think that what you said is just very key. We are, the first section of that third goal in the action framework is precisely about building those relationships and connections and listening from the communities to also hear what their priorities are and where they're coming from, and for us to be able to understand better, their circumstances to know how to better connect with them and engage them in the actions that we're taking. And I just, I keep thinking of the great work that Bowser has been doing with the Lawns to Legumes program and, providing incentives for action, and then them actually seeing how people are just doing it and just taking the technical advice and not even applying for the grant at the end of the day, So it's like, you create that momentum with different programs like that. And I think other communities see and want to do it too. But yeah, I would love to hear more about that, and we can schedule a meeting to discuss that further. Thank you.
Thank you, Public Member Nelson, and we'll go to Commissioner Peterson.
Thanks. I was curious too, just like if on the next part on the framework, the stakeholder engagement, like if you want to say anything more about that as we work with our stakeholders or how you would do that. But then I was thinking about Board Member Nelson's comment, engaging private landowners. One thing that I think is like a real opportunity, is looking at where the framework comes out or how we use the report is a lot of the dollars. I've traveled around farms as I've been commissioner, and I see pollinator projects that farmers have done, and even within our part of it that's in there, a water certification program that farmers use NRCS, or so you have them, too, in their work as a contributor. And so the Farm Bill actually expires of September 30th is this year, and so Congress is in the act of writing farm bill. And so I think Minnesota is really active. And then as an agency, we're trying to, put in comments into the farm bill to our state congressional delegation, because it isn't, I don't know that a lot of these farmers would have done this without the cost share from the USDA, NRCS. And so it's just a thought, like how that all plays into everything, but just also that's more of a comment, but then interested in the stakeholder part.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Yeah, so we are planning to do a second phase of engagement with two modalities, we could say. One is like broad, again, with our public engagement platform. We see people really liking to participate there, but it's limited, like it's limited to people that know how to use computers and that have good Wi-Fi, whatever. So we know it's not all encompassing. So we want to do also kind of direct engagement with key stakeholders, and that's what we try to do during the first round of engagement, but we think there's demographics we just couldn't engage with. That's where, as EQB, we're going to approach agencies like MDA and DOT and all of you to help us reach out to key groups that you have already connections with and rapport, so that they can give us feedback on the framework. So right now we're going to be focusing on the action framework to finalize the draft. But I think when we move the final stage, so the framework, once the framework is approved and is final, and then we move to start planning implementation, that's where I think engagement is also going to be crucial for us to create strategies on how to actually move those actions to action, to actually happen and strategize. So I think engagement is going to be key for us moving forward, and we're going to really be touching base with you all, with your agencies to help us connect with, I think we need a diverse perspective on the framework, and we want that to be reflected, in the final document. Thank you.
Next, we'll have a comment or question from Commissioner Kessler.
Just kudos, this is great and really exciting. And I like the way that the framework is laid out, and understand why there are links or to be determined, and like who's going to lead, who's going to enact, and who's going to encourage, and appreciate that work is to come. I will say this is how we put the state's climate action framework together, and we had to push on each other at the state level and with partners to see themselves in this work. So I encourage you to do that and be emboldened when you're talking to all of us and our staff, as well as the key partners, because I think everybody can get behind this and should be able to see themselves in it. And whether you're in first grade or you're a landowner, I think there's a part for everybody, and just making sure that we're thoughtful and strategic and encouraging when we all sign up for leading and enacting, etc.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessler, and thank you for telling me that, because definitely, as EQB, we want to, as staff, we want to tap into, our board members to help us be bold and also see what things are realistic to put, on the framework, things that we want to make sure. One thing I think the team and me, we want to make clear is that, the final framework is not going to be a list of promises. It's more of a menu of what we know as, technical experts, and also, tapping into the external experts of things that need to happen to move progress for pollinators. Because, we know that pollinators are still in trouble, even though it's been 10 years of this interagency, efforts of working, or even more. I need to remember my dates, but yeah, so I think, thank you for telling me that, and that's something we really want to do, and make sure that you all, are part of that development.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessler. And I think there are a couple online. I think it was Assistant Commissioner Dan Huff who had his hand up first. Dan, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Commissioner and Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Gutierrez Moreno. Great presentation. and great work. I really, I love I really enjoyed the presentation last year on this report and very much enjoyed it again. As a biologist by training, I love just species diversity. And the number of species that we have of pollinators just fascinates me. So thank you for that work. I wanted to emphasize a couple of the things though that you brought up that I think are just really important for us to think about. One is the impact of pollinators on our food production. Ultimately, for human health, we need good, nutritious, accessible foods. As Commissioner Peterson knows, this is a vital part of our economy as well. And so I just want to make sure that we really emphasize that. And I would love to see a little more emphasis next year, on next year's report, on the importance of pollinators for our food production, both from an economic perspective, but also just from a feeding people perspective. And the other thing I wanted to highlight, you said, is the impact of climate change. I think climate change is the big environmental issue that we're facing, this existential crisis, as Governor Walz refers to it. We know that because of climate changes, our changes in precipitation and temperatures and things are going to impact our food production as well. And that has a significant impact on human health and our economy. I am concerned about that double whammy of, a decrease in pollinators that are being impacted by climate change, and then just an impact on our farmers directly from severe weather and a changing weather patterns. I'd love to see for next year's report more emphasis, or not more emphasis, but just a more elaborate description of climate impacts on our pollinators as well. And maybe even, one of our goals is how do we support the state's climate action plan that Commissioner Kessler just spoke to. But very good work, and thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. And, it is a challenge to remember that not people don't read all the reports when they read this final report. And we don't want to sound repetitive sometimes. So we didn't include a specific, section this year on climate change. We didn't do that last year, but we did try to incorporate it within the narrative of the goals. But I really like that idea of, maybe even in the next year's report, bringing an expert that can speak to us to those impacts of climate change on pollinators and how that, has that ripple effect into our food systems and all of that. So I really appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Rebecca, like a good item to be working on to incorporate more of next year. So then we also have Jerry Van Amberg. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm following up with another biological person here speaking, but I do want to, say thank you to the protection team, the interagency protection team, the work that they have done. This is a program that I think has been accepted maybe more than any other program I can think of by people. It started down in the area around the city, certainly, but it has grown outward and outward to this, even in Moorhead now. And people are becoming more and more aware of pollinators and the importance of pollinators, and trying to do something about it. So I really have to give, I think, the credence to this program and what it has accomplished. I've been critical in the past of particularly in the pesticides. I'm still critical of that, not of this program or anything else. I'm critical more of our just the way we use pesticides as a people, and the problems that we have with that and the dangers that we have with that. And this certainly goes to answer some of those problems, and I think there's a lot here that will help as we move along with it. But the idea of, what I really like about this whole program is the idea that if we can do something to help out pollinators, it doesn't just help pollinators, it helps other insects. And it doesn't just help other insects, it helps a lot of other kinds of organisms, birds and there on up. And so I think it's very, very important in that respect that this has been carried out, and congratulate the team on what they have accomplished in doing this. I hope that this only grows. I know we have some new programs that are reaching out that I think will help in this whole pollinator program as well. But thank you again. Congratulations, and we'll hope that I wait to see the framework. The framework is I think is really important to see how that's going to develop. So I think it's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Jerry. All right, any other, got another one from Commissioner Stroman?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Rebecca, and to the rest of the team, thank you so much for your work on the report and on the draft action framework. I think that the development of the action framework is a really important step, and I'll just echo the comments that other colleagues here have made, particularly in light of the conversation we had last year at the EQB board meeting related to the pollinator report. And I think a very strong desire from board members, to add that element, and, satisfaction with the report. And like, this is great to have one place for this information, but where do we go to talk about what we're going to do about it and those goals? And so I just think this is a tremendous step forward. And I also think we have learned a lot over the past year, and a nod to Commissioner Kessler and her comments on the climate action framework. But, in participating with the public, in being able to get people's thoughts, and I think pollinators, like climate, is something that, the public is really interested in, and it's something that individual actions can contribute to the solution. And so there's real opportunity for us as public agencies to talk about sort of what we're doing at a macro level, and then to pair that with what individuals can do at their level. And so I just think there's so much potential here, and I think whatever we can do as agencies too. I think one of the things that worked well with the climate action framework was sort of that specific engagement from the sub-cabinet and the action teams, but also the engagement that each member agency did in the course of their daily work on climate to talk about it. And I think similarly with pollinators, many of the folks around this EQB table are doing our own work on pollinators and have our own opportunities with stakeholders. And I think that that can double the effect of our ability to reach Minnesotans on this issue. And then finally, I will just give appreciation to Assistant Commissioner Huff's suggestion for the incorporation of climate. And I think one of the things I really like about the report is the 2022 highlights, that highlights section. And I think it would be really great next year to see some highlights, maybe some of the starts of the actions out of the climate action framework where it relates to pollinators. And I think one of the things, we can do, to your point, Rebecca, that not everybody always reviews every report and people don't read them all. But if we can start to pull them together where those common threads exist for people, I think that's a real service that we can provide for the public too. So thank you to the team, and I'm very excited for the development of this framework and appreciate that follow-up on the board's conversation last year.
Thank you, Commissioner Stroman. Any other board members? Oh, Commissioner Kessler has one more item.
Well, I just want to, just building on what Commissioner Stroman and Commissioner Peterson said, I do think we should look at the Inflation Reduction Act that has been made available from the federal government. There's a tremendous amount of money in there to go towards agriculture, climate, water quality type activities. And I would imagine that pollinators show up in some of those. And I volunteer you to connect with people at the MPCA about that. Frank Kolesh is our president expert on the Inflation Reduction Act. And if there are grant opportunities that we should be pursuing as a state or identifying for partners or private landowners to pursue that advance not only our climate goals, but also the goals that you have laid out here, I think we don't want to miss that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessler. Any other board members who have comments or questions for Rebecca? Are there? Okay, so before we consider the resolution, we'll have time for public comments related to pollinator items. So again, please see the guidance and procedures on page 2 of the board packet. And Eric, the comments, you see any? Okay, we'll just keep this up and we'll see any comments or questions. All right, still nothing. So I think we could go ahead and move on to the resolution. And Rebecca, thank you for summarizing what's in the resolution for us. Thank you again for your presentation today and all the work that went toward the report. So is there a motion on the board to approve the resolution?
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessler. Is there a second? I'll go with Board Member Nelson, the second. Thank you. All right. Instead of roll call, I think we can do an aye or nay sort of vote. So why don't we do that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Hearing any, so that the resolution moves forward. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so then next on the agenda is the discussion on the 2023 Environmental Congress. EQB engagement and Director Faith Krogstad is here to present to the board. So welcome, Faith. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. It's always hard to follow Rebecca, charming Rebecca, knowledgeable Rebecca, and all these beautiful pollinator photos. But I also have a fun topic today, which is the 2023 Environmental Congress. I just want to do a check if everyone can hear me okay on this microphone. I can do this with my left hand. So again, I'm Faith Krogstad. I'm the Engagement Communications Director at the EQB. Here to talk about the 2023 Environmental Congress. Today in this presentation, I'll talk about what the Environmental Congress is, review the 2019 Congress, and talk a little bit about how planning is moving forward for 2023. And then I'd like to engage you all in a discussion about what is the purpose of this? What is the most important thing we can do with this opportunity? This is the premier event of the EQB. And you know, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of fun, and we have many things we could be doing. So if you have guidance and thoughts on how we can really make that, really specify what we want to do with this opportunity, that would be really helpful. And then also, you know, we've gone through this pandemic, and that has really shifted how people feel about being in person and being online in various ways. And people have gotten kind of creative about how we hold events in these times. And I know you all have been attending many of these events, and I would be interested to find out if you have opinions about
what kinds of formats might be good for this event. And then just the approach to our planning, how can we make sure we're Minnesotans and making sure that people who have been underrepresented in these conversations before are part of the planning and the implementation and benefit from this as well. So what is our charge for the Environmental Congress? It's in statute. And basically what it says is that we should get a lot of different people together from a lot of different sectors and exchange reports. This was written pre-internet, so it doesn't give us a lot of specificity about how we do this. But let's get people together and let's talk about environment. And I was looking back at our history of hosting environmental congresses, and just want to mention that in 2013 there were many. They called them citizen forums, but they were sort of like listening sessions that happened prior to the event, and then they also had a youth congress, and then all of that rolled into the environmental congress in 2013. There was one in 2017, which was like a long event, kind of a more traditional sort of summit or conference. And then I'm going to talk more about the 2019 Congress, which I'm familiar with. And I just wanted to quickly thank those of you who were involved in and contributed to that event. I had a whole presentation ready to go in 2020 to thank you all, and that was scratched somehow. So I never got to say thank you, but that was really a great event, and we got a lot of positive feedback from that, especially the interaction that people had with board members at that. So that event was in 2013, December 3rd, at Minnesota State University, Mankato. And our theme was the climate for action is changing. So we really infused climate throughout that event. And I'm just going to talk a little bit. I know a lot of you were not there, and I want, ending this next one, I think it would be helpful for people to understand about, what did our last Congress look like and what feedback did we get from it, et cetera. So at our last Congress, it was a one-day event. We had 300 or so people in person, and then about 75 online who were able to watch sort of the larger sort of ballroom-based events. And then on the left there is a chart showing the breakdown of people from different sectors. And so you can see that we had representation from various sectors, and the state, tribal, federal government one is pretty heavy. And in part, that's because we had a lot of interagency staff supporting this event, giving presentations, et cetera. And then there were legislators as well. So I think a large portion of that would be the state government portion. So as far as activities, we had a plenary presentation, and in the photo there is one of our emerging environmental leaders, Sydney Bauer, who gave a plenary talk that was planned by a subgroup of our Emerging Environmental Leaders program. We also had Dr. Kate Brauman, who gave an overview of climate change impacts in Minnesota and projections into the future. Unfortunately, one of our plenary speakers from the Lower Sioux community was sick and unable to attend that day. In the morning, we had breakout sessions, and again, these were all climate focused, and so we had ones, on agriculture, transportation, et cetera. And our Emerging Environmental Leaders team also planned and executed one of those breakouts about climate storytelling. We used a technology called Slido that allowed people to give, comments and ask questions using their phones. So it was a way that people in the audience could be participating in the event and interact with us, as well as the people who were remote the event. So that was a great way for people to sort of plug in and engage. And then down on the bottom left, the leadership forum, we had a catered lunch for everyone. And then the governor came and riled up the crowd about climate change. One of the great things about this event was that it in part really drove this announcement of the executive order that established the climate change sub-cabinet. So he announced it the day before the Congress, and then came to the Congress and gave a great speech about the importance of tackling climate change.
And then we also had a leadership forum with many members of our board, as well as members of the climate change sub-cabinet. And people had prepared remarks, and then people in the audience using that Slido tool were able to ask questions, and people could vote for their favorite questions. And we could really get a sense from the audience what people wanted to hear. And that was the most popular activity of the event. Following that, we did open space dialogues, which was kind of the most experimental piece of this, which was basically we gave control over to the attendees to say, what do you want to learn about or talk about with each other? So we gathered everyone into a big auditorium and people and said, what do you want to talk about? People wrote topic ideas on big Post-it notes. We assigned those to rooms. You can see in this room, building resiliency in the conventional agricultural matrix. And then people could determine where they wanted to go and talk about the topic. Whenever we plan an event like this, we have to guess, what do people want to hear about, right? And so this is a way that we can actually crowdsource that in real time. So that was really interesting, and I think people really enjoyed that. And then at the end, we did a networking hour. We asked a few people to offer some reflections on the day, including Gwen Westerman. And then we just gave people time to talk, because we know that that's an important piece of an event like this, is just building those connections with your existing networks and also forming those new connections. One other aspect of the event, our emerging environmental leaders, we had a third group working on what we called the welcoming exhibition, and they designed postcards to ask young people across the state, what would you like to see Minnesotans do to address climate change? And we distributed them to thousands of students in different school districts. They sent them back to us, and we distributed them to participants at the Congress and displayed them on our big screens. And that was a way to bring that youth voice into the event. These postcards were actually entered into the collections at the Minnesota History Museum and the Science Museum. As far as the outcomes from the event, we asked people, was it informative? Did it help you connect to your existing networks? Did it connect you to new people? Were you exposed to new ideas? Did it allow for dialogue? Were you able to get to some common ground? And did it inspire you to take action? And these are all, we had this worded more fully. But you can see in this chart, the dark blue is strongly agree, light blue is agree. And if you put those two together, you can see that, for the most part, people felt like the event met those outcomes. And I'll just say that, a one-day event is not going to do everything, but we had really good feedback on it in general. So some strengths and challenges of the 2019 Congress. There was a lot of public interest in the event, which was wonderful. People were really excited about it. We had that strong leadership presence from the governor, from EQB, and then in other sectors as well. It was timed with state policy action. It was an interactive event. It was cross-sector. And it also was a wide enough, sort of accessible as far as the topics went, that, your average person who wants to learn about climate change in Minnesota could kind of plug in and gain something from that. The challenges, we had such high demand for the event that we had to turn away a lot of people. We opened registration and had to close it down almost immediately. And people were really upset about that because many of our seats were sort of filled by all the people who were planning and implementing the event. A lot of our partners who were helping us plan and implement the breakout sessions. People we were inviting from the Mankato area, leaders there. And so it didn't allow a lot of space to open it up more broadly than those sort of invited guests. Also, it was a free event. And so we know that free events have attrition, that people will just kind of wake up in the morning and say, yeah, I just don't think this is going to work or whatever. And we planned for that. So we over-enrolled, but the attrition was higher than that. So it was sort of frustrating to have all these people clamoring to be in the room with us, but then end up with empty seats. We did not ask about racial and ethnic diversity of participants, but during the event using Slido, we did get that feedback that people felt that we did not have good representation in the room and that people really in the future from us. And also just that, like I said, this is an event that can do many things. We always try to do a lot of things in this, and it's one day, and it's also a really long day. So there's just a lot of, this sort of format has its strengths. We asked people what they wanted to do at the next Congress, and now this is from 2019, so these might be answers. But for what it's worth, the themes that we got, people wanted to continue learning and taking action on climate change with a justice mindset, agriculture as a solution to climate change, and also be focused on actions that we could take. And this is a photo of that open space dialogue where we were organizing those. And we also asked what activities people wanted to do, and I just want to highlight 3 of these that people really, again, wanted to focus on. What action steps can we take? They really wanted to see state leadership present and engaged. It was just exciting for people, not only that leaders were up on the stage answering questions, but that leaders were in the breakout sessions. They were sitting at a lunch table with from the event that you could just have a conversation. And then people also wanted to hear from topic experts as well. We asked for feedback on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and the suggestions that we got: co-creating the event with diverse partners, bringing decision makers and those most affected by environmental, bringing those 2 groups together, aligning our content with our target audience interests, make sure that it's relevant, and then reducing barriers to participation. And this is always a challenge, but that event capacity, of course, making sure that if people are interested, they're able to participate. Timing, we held this on a weekday during a typical workday. And so that helps some people be there because it's related to their jobs. And so then they can be there for that. For other people, the only time they would be able to come is if it's in the evening or on a weekend. The location, some people loved that we did not hold it in City's metropolitan area. Other people said, wow, it would have been great to have this in the metropolitan area where people have access to transit and there's more density of population. And then having childcare available could help some people participate. And then I just wanted to make a note about digital accessibility, and this is a note that Slido tool that we use helps people give feedback, gives people a way of interacting, but it is not accessible for some audience. For instance, people who are blind, and who use screen readers or something like that. So that's something to keep in mind for future events. So now moving on to planning for the 2023 Environmental Congress. Isn't this a great picture? So again, really want to hone in on what's the purpose of the event, and use that to inform what our format is. So before we decide what format we're going to do, let's make sure that what it is we want to get done, that we design the format from what sort of makes. So we'll start on the left-hand side, and this is just something I would like to see. I loved all the comments about integrating the pollinators and the climate change and the water and all this stuff together. And I feel the same way about the Environmental Congress, that we should be thinking about this as a way to forward a lot of the different efforts that we have here at EQB. Those include the environment and energy report. I think it would make sense to use the Congress to share that information about the state of our environment and the emerging environmental leaders. That will be up to the youth if they want to be engaged in this event, but I think it would be likely. How can we use the Congress to move things forward in our environmental review program, pollinators, water programs, and also use it to inform our organizational strategy. That it's a great way to engage a lot of people. on that. And then EQB's director is a member of the Climate Change Subcabinet, and we have been very active as a staff in contributing to the climate action framework and the climate engagement that has been happening over the last couple of years. And so, this is an opportunity that we can, help maintain some momentum in that area and sort of bring that together and make sure that we're working together. So if we move over to the right, what we have for pretty broad purpose statements for this, celebrating the 50th anniversary of EQB and NEPA. I was here in September, and those were all mashed together. And thanks to your feedback and other feedback that we've received, it's become clear that we need to sort of decouple the celebration of EQB and from MEPA. So we'll be celebrating MEPA earlier than the Congress, but we could certainly bring any threads from that event, from that celebration into the Congress. We want to use the Congress to engage Minnesotans on the work of EQB and future strategy for environmental quality, and then report on the state of the environment and progress on climate action. If we hold this event in September of 2023, that will be a year from the release of the climate action. So that would be a good time to say, okay, what have we gotten done so far? And then also use the event to advance that climate networking, planning, and action. So in this example planning worksheet, on the left-hand side, we've got those purpose statements that I just gave. And again, I'd love some feedback on, are we going in the right direction here? Do those seem right to you? But then, getting a little bit more specific. What do we want to do when we're engaging people on programming work? And, the pollinator program is an example. We will be working on that action framework. So then how does the Congress, how is that a stepping stone in that process? Does that make sense? And what would that look like? And so kind of building this out until we get to, okay, what does the format look like? So again, the timing is fall 2023, proposed anyway. I would be establishing a steering committee to design the event and then convening an interagency implementation team for executing the event. And then again, the format is sort of TBD at this point. And I have had some conversations with some folks on the climate engagement team actually about, what kinds of engagement might be interesting for this event. There could be some of that targeted pre-event engagement where we do some pre-work with particular stakeholder groups or whatever, and then say, hey, do you want to bring these stories? Do you bring these ideas and have a dialogue at the Congress? There's also an idea to bring on some ambassadors to make sure that we have those groups that are underrepresented part of the planning process and engaged in the event. We would provide stipends, et cetera, for that. And then this is an idea that it sounds like the DNR is doing in some corner of the agency, but building these communities of practice where you bring people together and people get excited about an idea. They are prompted to make a commitment to work together, and then they would meet and then follow up to report on that progress that they have made. So making, it's not just this one-day event, but what is coming out of that act. And then having a newsletter to keep people kind of engaged in our work and carry that thread forward to Congresses. And then everyone's got opinions about how they feel about in-person events and virtual events. And what I heard people say is, oh, if it's in person, it'd be great if it was close to home and not a long day. And I really want to meet people, but I don't want that to be my job. Someone to help me with that. I don't want to mingle. I think we all forgot how to mingle. People don't want to just sit and listen. They want to be able to voice their opinions. There were some people who wanted to learn about a place, get outside, and then kind of play up that sense of community. We, a lot of us are working remotely and kind of behind screens all the time. How can we feel like we belong together and we have a shared purpose here? And then in virtual, there were some ideas about spreading it out over multiple days, and that can be spread out a lot, but the closer they are together, the more it feels like a cohesive event. They want to have active participation, alternate between activities. And then there was just a recognition that this can be a way of making sure that more people can participate who may live farther from population centers. And I'll just note, people tended to not love hybrid because it tended to be harder to implement, more complex, and it sort of can take away from the experience of people who are both virtual and in person sometimes. So for example, we could have an event where we have an in-person plenary where we have state leaders coming and welcoming everyone into the Congress, sharing this report out on environmental trends and climate progress, getting people really excited. And then, we could have online breakout sessions, that could even be on a different day. And I'll just say too that that plenary there can be a live webcast, so anybody can watch it, and we don't have limited space. Maybe there's limited space in the room, but anyone can join online. So then those webinar breakout sessions, and then can we have in-person networking events? And those can take many forms. It might be a site tour, and those could also be online. If people are unable to be in person, we could do networking online as well. And then again, that plenary closing. So that's one example of, you can break this event into pieces if we want to, and then have different formats as it makes sense. So that was a lot of information about the Congress. And so this is the opportunity to talk about, what do we want to do with this fun event? What is the most important thing we want to do with it? What format or formats do you think would be well suited for our purpose? And then how should we approach planning for this event, especially considering diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility?
Great. Well, thank you, Faith, for going through your reflections from the last or the 2019, all the brainstorming so far about how we could go about this next year's event. So, and maybe one quick question for you with the hybrid, where you talk about hybrid. So you did talk about if one way to do it would be like a live broadcast or live streaming the plenary. But when we talk about hybrid, then that's potentially those in a room together as well as connecting online. And that's, I know, like planning 2 conferences, right, to do that. So that's a bigger effort and maybe more expensive. So, but with that, I know Commissioner Stroman has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Faith, for the walk down memory lane of the last Environmental Congress and the thoughts on this next one. And I apologize, I need to leave early because I get to go to the dentist after this meeting. And so just a couple of kind of thoughts or questions that I want to pose for the group and for staff for conversation. And could you just go back to the slide where it talks about the purpose? Because I think it just might be helpful. And one of the things that I just noted, and I really like your diagram where it kind of pulls all of the pieces of the EQB into this Congress. But one question I have is then when you go to the purpose, the only piece that sort of has that action component to it is the climate piece, and on your next slide. And so I mean, I would be equally interested in action on pollinators, as we just talked about. We have that action framework under development. We have environmental review, which, action on that often is a little bit of a struggle. And so it would be actually really interesting to have a conversation, I think, with folks about how we get some action on that. So I would just encourage us, if we're going to think big like this, which I personally like, that we think about action in all of those elements and not just on climate. And then the one other piece I would just say about, climate is, because we have the sub-cabinet and we have the governor's advisory committee and we have a number of established stakeholder groups, I think we'd have to think really carefully about what would a focus here add that isn't duplicative or wouldn't feel like, because that's already a lot of people in a room. Like, I don't know how we do that without the members of the governor's advisory committee, for example. And then to the point you made, the room's already so full of the people who are already part of that conversation. How do we make space for new people? And so maybe there's, thinking carefully if there is a piece there, what strategically is the piece of value that the Environmental Congress can add to that conversation that we can't do in one of those other forums, because otherwise my fear is it will feel like the same people with a different title on the meeting. So just a couple of quick thoughts, but I think this looks like a really exciting conversation. I look forward to see it evolving.
Thank you, Commissioner Stroman. And I agree. I think one of the earlier slides talked about you got to keep talking about climate, but action is important. So, and I think your points about those outside of EQB and outside of the governor's subcabinet on climate action, we need to get more input and have them at the table, whether it's a virtual table or a live table. But yes, I'd like to open up for more comments, questions from the board. Go ahead, Board Member Hintz.
Yeah, thank you, Faith. I have a couple ideas or comments. I've had so many ideas about this, but I appreciate seeing the purpose and like separating out the MIPA celebration, because originally I thought those two should be here, but I probably got to hold this closer. But I can understand why it would make sense to separate those out. I guess my biggest thought, in order to accommodate the number of people that probably should be included, is to have multiple events. And I know that's a lot of planning. I tend to move away from virtual just because of the challenge of really engaging in meaningful dialogue. And I think that's a super important part of meeting the objectives here. But if it's possible to either do like 5 of these where you're in the regions around the state, or I'm thinking of like almost like a mini version still around the state, but then having delegates from those regions to like the main Congress where they can represent the work that was already done in those regions, just so that you can really allow people to participate meaningfully without having to travel, which is just so challenging. And so I guess that's probably my primary comment is I feel like you have to go to the people in order to get that meaningful.
Thank you, Board Member Hintz. And do I have another board member? Commissioner Kessler.
Thanks, Faith. So I too have thought about this, and as someone who's super close to the climate action framework and really invested in the actions that we put in there and that we called for ourselves and others to do, I would be remiss if I didn't say we should have a component of this being a report out on what has happened, the actions that we have taken, that others have taken, that are underway, and then the things we have next. Because I am very sensitive to the fact that state government produces these reports and these frameworks, and they're all really excellent. And then, you move on to the next one and people are like, oh, did we do something about that? And I think everybody who put all their time in, the thousands of people who commented, expect action, and we will have failed as society if we don't act now anyway. So I would encourage us to really carve out time to talk about the actions that were called for in the framework that are underway, and to celebrate that. And I appreciate these purposes too. And I think at any point when we're bringing all these people together, if we can inform, connect, and inspire as like a high level purpose, like are people feeling like they know what is on deck, that they're connected to that work and that they're really inspired to be a part of that work and to encourage others to do so, then we will have been successful. I don't know that should say it should be hybrid or should be here, but I think really being as tangible as possible about actions that we're taking and advocating for and who's a critical partner in celebrating them. And then I think you can, within that scope, find landowners and pollinator champions who are part of the work of the Climate Action Framework implementation that will cross some of these other purposes to really connect it. So there's my pitch for Climate Action Framework accountability.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessler. And yeah, I want to also point out too one thing that resonates with me on the purpose here is engage Minnesotans, so outside of our board, but on the work and future strategy for environmental quality. And that's one thing I think would be really key if we could come away from the Congress with what other strategies should we be thinking about working toward outside of what we're already putting in the framework and what we're accomplishing through the framework by that point, but that can move other actions forward too. So other comments, thoughts, questions from the board? Oh, got one here online. Oh. We've got a comment or question from Sue Vento from the Met Council.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. As a former teacher, I'd like to recommend that although the commissioner of education and the higher education leaders aren't a part of this organization and body, that they be involved to some extent in the planning of the conference, at least for some input. I think without question, if I walked away with anything 3 years ago following the Congress, it was just the amazing energy that the youth brought in their roles in the agenda, and to have educators and students at all levels to some extent involved either in the planning or the program itself, I think would be very beneficial, because for a lot of us, we're doing this work for the future. I'd also like to recommend that with that in mind, that people leave with as many tools as possible for their daily lives. I always feel empowered after a good session, like a good day like we had 3 years ago, when I can leave with things that I can do at home to make a difference. I'm always feeling like I'm not doing enough. So for those of us who suffer from that kind of Catholic guilt, it would be great. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Yes, I can relate to that. Other comments, questions from board members? Suggestions? Mr. Peterson.
I just throw in, having attended a few of them over the years, even before Commissioner, I like in these formats too, like the opportunity to discuss with smaller, and sometimes, when these have been really big, sometimes smaller, you go from 500 to 100 or something, but it's still, I do think it's been helpful, or it's made, it really interesting to go to. And that was my other question, was the climate. Done a lot of work on that, and that's just my, however we do that, gives the opportunity to touch, a lot of these, different topics too.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Any other board members with comments, questions, suggestions? All right. So, good thoughts. And, one other thing that resonated with me before we close here, Faith, I wanted to say and I wasn't involved at the back in 2019, excuse me, but the suggestion cards from our youth, and Commissioner Peterson was just talking about engaging them. As they're looking to the future from their perspective, things that we should be doing, concerns they have, I think it's really important. So any way we can incorporate that again, I think would be great. So, okay, well, we'll continue the dialogue on this as we're planning. And I understand you also mentioned getting a group together, interagency group to work on this. So agencies will be working to get that group together for you and we'll go from there. But, oh, I'm sorry, one other thing. Go ahead, Board Member Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be quick, and I'm not sure if this is a good idea or not, but I'll throw it out so you can think about it. There are a lot of other organizations that have events. Is it possible to maybe have a small window at multiple attach your wagon to their events? Maud has a conference in December every year. Bowser has their training academy, so on and so forth, that you could have a small window of a couple hours to have something about this there that might save on some of the staff efforts and have a wider audience as well.
I just wanted to say thank you for all the comments and suggestions. And that's something I've been thinking about is, we only have a certain number of staff, and certainly if we have really big ideas, we can go after more resources to make those happen. But I think it always makes sense to look for those places where it just, it would be easy and the audience is there and whatnot. And, I have a foot in the climate engagement work and a foot over here in EQB Environmental Congress planning. And I think that's really helpful to see, what is shaping up in the climate engagement work and seeing if there can be some sort of integration there as well. I think there will be a lot of opportunity for things like that.
Thank you again, Faith, for your work on this, and we'll keep coordinating on this as things go forward. So with that, why don't we go ahead and then move on to the public comment period? All right, and our Executive Director, Eric Dahl, is taking a look to see if we have any, but we'll follow public comment procedures and guidelines that are provided on page 2 of the packet. And so please raise your hand in WebEx if you would like to comment. We'll call on those who signed up, but doesn't sound like any signed up. Okay, so we'll just give it a minute in case we have somebody who would like to go ahead and raise their hand. Another minute. I'm still not seeing anything, neither of us. Okay. All right. Not hearing anyone wanting to make public comments today. So we will go ahead and move on to the closing. So again, I want to also thank Board Member Gehring for her work and those many years of work on the EQB, and we're going to miss you. Thank you for being a part of this today too. And I wish you were here in person so we could thank you in person, but also just want to give one more opportunity if anyone else wants to say anything on that. Otherwise, I want to go ahead and thank all the board members for your participation today, those here and online. Oh, there we go. Go ahead, Jerry. Jerry, are you muted?
There we go. Pardon me. I would like to express a concern about the lack of public comment. I feel as though this board is driven a lot by public comment, as it should be. And I don't know why is the reason we're not seeing any? Is it because of what has happened the last 2 years? I suspect that has had a great impact on it. But I would like to ask that that we look and see if there's something that can, enliven that, because I think it's important that we have public comment, public criticism of what the board is looking at and doing.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that comment. So why don't we take that back and think about how we can make sure that we're being very transparent about the meetings and the opportunity to comment, and that we want public comments. We want participation by the public in these meetings during this public comment period. And that only makes us a better, stronger board if we have that outside input on what we're doing. So, oh, go ahead, Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Yes, so the December meeting is on December 14th, and at that meeting, we're going to hear from Denise Wilson, and she's going to talk about the process of the pilot program. She's ill today, so she's virtual. She'll talk about the EAW form and the recommendations from ERIS, the Environmental Review Implementation Subcommittee, and then she'll walk us all through an implementation plan that they have. So it'll be an action item for that resolution. Then we'll also hear and be introduced to some folks from MMB that are helping us on a continuous improvement project where we're looking at the environmental review program, and Kayla Walsh will be giving an update on that. And then we'll also be hearing about the obsolete rules report, which we took some feedback on in this last month, which we'll submit to the legislature. And as far as the public comment right now, I would say that, well, maybe folks aren't showing up right now to the meeting. We have had lots of public comment throughout the whole pilot program, as well as I know that Rebecca had really robust public comment in the pollinator input, and we're really building a whole plan for the continuous improvement project as well, because it'll be Kayla and MMB in facilitating that are going to do a lot of outreach to make sure that we hear from different stakeholders and different folks that we don't normally hear from on how we could improve the environmental review program. Yep. You'll get that ahead of time. So because the board meeting was moved up, we'll be sending out the packet right after Thanksgiving to you all. And you'll get a report from ERIS. Denise texting me here. Sharon. Oh, she can't hear him. She would, oh, that's right. So if you want to repeat it, or I can as well.
You can, yeah, go ahead.
He was just wondering, Denise, about if there will be a report on the pilot program to the board at the December meeting. And my answer to that is yes, there will be. And so that'll be in the packet, which we'll be sending out December 2nd so that you have enough time. And Denise has been working with the whole climate technical team on that pilot program. And then if you would like some details on the pilot program, she also presented that to the ERIS meeting in October, and I can share that with you too.
Eric, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Denise.
I'll just share that right now the plan is to actually spend a little bit of time, and I know that Nick is on the call today, as well as and I know Commissioner Stroman left, but really having the chair of the subcommittee for the pilot program implementation summarize a little bit about what happened with the pilot program and their role, and then asking Commissioner Stroman as the chair of the Environmental Review Implementation Subcommittee to really talk about their role in this process, and they'll both be giving recommendations to the board. And then I'll also give an overview of a draft resolution. And like Eric said, the climate technical team has created an implementation plan that's draft also that we'll be getting your feedback on as we move forward, should you choose to approve the form at that time.
Thank you, Denise. And we would have a public comment period right before we would look to move for approval on that for moving forward then too. So it very well could be that we do get more public input at the December meeting. All right. Okay, well, with that, we have reached the end of our agenda. So if I could get a motion to adjourn, that'd be great. Thank you, Board Member Bakken. And a second. Thank you, Board Member Hintz. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Right. Meeting is adjourned.